So, could you please come on stage, please? Karen Moss, who is the Director of Psychology Clinics and Clinical Services Coordinator, Clinical Psychology for the School of Social Sciences and Psychology. We also have Penny Gardner, who's the Academic Course Advisor for Psychotherapy and Counselling Therapy Studies with the School of Social Sciences and Psychology.
And I can represent the Master of Art Therapy.
And Penny's also representing the Master of Art Therapy. We have Associate Professor Nida Denson, Academic Course Advisor, 4th year Psychology Programs with the School of Social Sciences and Psychology. Associate Professor Phoebe Bailey, Director of Programs, Psychology, Human Behaviour with the Social Sciences and Psychology Program. And we have another person.
Yeah, you have Wang Hongfu. He's here.
Oh, Wing Hong Fu, who's here from the
Graduate Research School.
And
Graduate Research School, great.
And Janet Conti.
And Janet Conti as well, thank you. Director of Academic Programs for Clinical Psychology
And Professional Psychology.
and Professional Psychology. Sorry, there's a lot to remember there. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. And can I please ask, to begin with, if you'd like to share a little bit of information on the programs that you're representing here today and what might be important for our students to know regarding their options when they finish their psychology degree. Do we have a microphone?
Yes, sorry.
Whoop.
My name is Karen Moses. I am the Director of Psychology Clinics here at Western Sydney University. So the Psychology Clinic falls within the Master of Clinical Psychology program. So it is your first introduction to seeing clients if you choose to go down the Master of Clinical Psychology pathway.
Thanks, Karen. I'm Penny Gardner with Therapy Studies, which has the Master of Art Therapy, which is a 2-year full-time course, Master of Psychotherapy and Counselling, which is becoming quite popular, mixing in with the 4 years of your psych, and also a graduate diploma of counselling, which will enable you to become registered as a counsellor after 2 years part-time. And we're very hands-on. You get to do client work very early and quite a lot of it. And I think that's all I'm going to say right at the moment.
Hi, Nida Denson. I'm the Academic Course Advisor for 4th year Psychology, so that includes the honours as well as the Graduate Diploma of Psychology. It's a 1 year, it's the 4th year, 1 year program accredited for pathways into becoming a psychologist.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Bailey, a Director of Academic Program for Years 1 to 4 in Psychology. You've already heard about Year 4, you're already in Years 1 to 4, but I can give sort of broad advice about all the different pathways.
Hi, I'm Wing Hong Fu, and I'm here to represent the Graduate Research School, or mainly the Masters of Research. I'm not an academic, I'm actually currently a student in the Masters of Research program, so this is a step that you can take if you want to go more into academia and you have finished your honours or you haven't yet. So I actually finished my honours and then I went into the Masters of Research as well.
I'm Janet Conti, Director of Academic Programs for Clinical and Professional Psychology Programs. So we have 3 programs to secure registration as a psychologist. The first one is, as you know, a Master of Professional Psychology. We have a Master of Clinical Psychology. We also have a combined degree, so we have a PhD combined with a clinical master's program. So the idea with our programs here is that we actually have a few students up the back there from our clinical master's program, so I'm sure that they would be happy to talk to anyone about the clinical master's program who might be interested later, perhaps, if I could volunteer you. And our programs are designed to actually get you work ready and to get you able to work flexibly, to be able to work with your clients with tailored therapeutic interventions. We teach a range of therapeutic modalities and we believe that's very important to get you work ready to be able to provide optimal treatment to clients in a range of situations that you will end up working in.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind holding on to the microphone, because a few questions are coming through. The first question is, how are applications to the Master's Psychology program assessed?
So that would be clinical and professional psychology, I guess, at this stage, rather than research. So we look at, the first point of call is we have around 500 applications a year, but that's not to put you off, because most of those, or all of those applicants apply for 6 universities. So don't get put off by numbers and think that I'll never get into these programs, because you know, they're very accessible programs to get into with a 4th year. The professional masters requires around a credit average throughout your undergraduate degrees, years 1 to 4. Clinical masters requires a 2-1 honours at least, and around a distinction average for your years 1 to 4. So we assess that first, and people that meet that criteria. We also look at where people put our university. So if you put us between 1 and 3, you're much more likely to get an interview than if you put us right down the bottom, because what we find is people that put us higher up are more likely to take positions with us. And although we do 280 interviews, we can't interview all 500 people who apply. So we do around 280. So once people have actually met that sort of academic criteria for either of those programs, then we offer interviews, and at that point everyone's at a level playing field, and what we're looking for is people who are actually ready to step into doing this sort of work. And that will mean that we look at your work experience to see whether you have any work experience. We also look at what's called inherent requirements. So I would encourage you to look at inherent requirements on the website. You'll see that when you look at the handbook for both of those programs, there's a section on inherent requirements. So I encourage you to read those and look at those, and just be reflective with yourself to see whether or not you feel this is a good time for you to be doing a program such as this, because this program requires you to be able to, as our previous speaker talked about, to be able to sit with a client who's distressed. And if you're going through a lot of distress yourself, it's very hard to do that. So working out whether or not this is a good time for you to be doing a program such as this. It's a demanding program, not only in the sense that you're stretched professionally, you know, but you're also stretched academically, and you're also there's a lot of things that need to be, a lot of balls in the air at the same time. So, but essentially at the interview, then if you get through on the interview, you'll be offered a position, and then it's from there. So I hope that's answered those questions. We do ask for referee reports as well through the HODSPA website, so some of you would have seen that too, and so we have a look at those as well. But please do look at the inherent requirements for these programs. They are essential for you to be able to meet those inherent requirements to do the work, to be a professional psychologist. So I'd encourage you to look at those and reflect on those.
Thank you. We have another question now from someone in the audience who wants to know what the difference is between the counselling and psychotherapy, and how that is different from psychological practice. So perhaps Penny might be able to answer that one.
We're going to be here a while. So essentially, counselling and psychotherapy, in the way we present them, are relational arts. So it is not psychology. We follow a trauma-informed model, not the medical model. We don't work with assessment and treatment. All right. We every year when I come here, there are people that talk to me that know it at their heart that they're actually counsellors. They're the ones that go, where are the people? I want the people right now. All right. And then there are the ones that there's a lot going on out there in the world about the understanding the brain and things, and we teach you to be right-brained therapists.
Sorry, can everyone hear at the back? Yeah.
Enough? Which is the relational part of the brain. All right, so we just sit in a room and sit well with people who are in distress. We wonder what happened to them, not what's wrong with them that we need to treat. So we're very much about healing, and I'm not saying psychologists don't do this too. All right, so I'm not trying to say that, but we have a very particular way of being a presence in the room. We want you to develop the person of the therapist. We ask you to go near yourself. Janet was talking about how is this the right time for you? You might encounter your own life situations and things that make it hard for you to be in a room with a person. We ask you to know what things you're going to bump into personally if you're actually in a room with another person. So there's just a different focus, and we all do good work with people.
Thank you, Penny. There's a lot to take in there. Thank you. We have another question now, which is asking, can you please introduce more about the strengths and weaknesses of the 3 ways to general registration? Thanks. Who would like to answer that one?
Who's to answer that?
Nobody.
Now I've got the microphone again. I was going to say to you, just to clarify about inherent requirements before I go any further, it doesn't mean you can't do a program like this if you get distressed. We all get distressed, okay? So it's not that you shouldn't be doing a program if you're going through some sort of stress. It's really your capacity to be able to reflect on yourself and to know whether or not you're in a good place at a particular time to be doing this sort of work. So I just wanted to, like the students, I think that probably have more difficulties are the ones that keep powering on and struggle to reflect on that I'm actually having difficulties, I need to get support, I need to step back a bit. They're the students that we tend to find have more difficulty than the ones that go, oh, well, I'm stressed, but I'm getting support and this is what I'm doing and etc. And I've decided to reduce my program, etc. because, and make amends for my, so it's the capacity to reflect as well that's very important. Now, the next question about the 3 pathways and the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so I'm a firm believer. I know that we have a hierarchical system around clinical, professional, 4+2 pathways that exists. But I'm a firm believer that really it's essential within the workplace for us to be working collegially with each other and to be respectful of those different pathways. And at Western, we are very much, like all our postgraduate teachers teach across both programs, and we do our best to provide both programs with the most optimal training. So yes, although if you're a clinical psychologist, that might open up doors that may not be as open for you if you're a professional psychologist, such as a job description might say you have to be a clinical psychologist for this job. Other jobs might say we want a clinical or a professional psychologist. We are looking for the person rather than actually what their title is. But at the end of the day, clinical psychologists, if you go into private practice, can actually get a higher Medicare rebate, which means they can charge more usually because it's less of a gap. It's the gap doesn't become so problematic for clients. So I think probably, I guess the thing for me is I think of examples really. I think of people that I've worked with and that I've supervised. And, you know, I've supervised a number of professional psychologists. One notable one actually ended up working in a private hospital in a specialist eating disorder unit. She did such a good job there that she ended up replacing the clinical psychologist on the ward who, because she'd done such a great job and they actually wanted her in that role. So I think there's fluidity between the two, but there's definitely some differences. And I guess the clinical psychology program probably sets you up with, well, we do more training around assessment and diagnosis. And probably more work around working with specialist groups. So groups who have, you know, a less common presentations, I guess. So there'd be a bit more around that. Professional psychology has that broader focus. We only have you for 1 year in professional psychology. So we are trying to fit a lot into that year, but you cover the same sort of stuff that you cover in clinical psychology, but maybe without as much on assessment or as much on specific specialist or specific groups who are less frequently presenting. The 4+2 pathway, that was the third pathway, I guess, or the clinical master's PhD. I guess the 4+2 pathway is, you know, that we don't offer a program to support students in that space. I know the COP does, and I think it's really important to be supported in that pathway. And again, you come out with registration like you do with a 5+1, and I think the most important thing during that couple of years that you're getting your registration as a psychologist is that you have support, because I think it can be a very isolating experience otherwise, and also your training can risk being a bit narrow unless you're getting opportunities to broaden your horizons with perhaps having a range of different supervisors with different views, as well as a range of different teachers who have different views. So I'm not sure if that has answered the question very well, but
if it hasn't, then perhaps the students
maybe ask it again, whoever asked it, if you
can
want more
ask later on
information or
as well.
something more
We have,
specific. But like I just want you to know, at Western, we're very much interested in every individual student, regardless of whether you're doing clinical psychology or professional psychology. Your training matters to us, and we want you to be the best that you can be.
Thank you. We have quite a few questions coming in about the Master's Clinical program, and I would encourage students, if we can't get around to answering those questions today, that you contact your school or any of the panel representatives here today to discuss that later on. But we have a question here now about the Master of Research, which students asking, can you explain what's involved in the Master of Research course?
So the Masters of Research course is 2 years. It has 1 year of coursework in it and 1 year where you do your thesis. It's 20 to 25,000 word thesis. And the reason why I did it personally is because I'm a domestic student and they have a really nice scholarship program with the course itself. So if you get an average grade mark of 65 in the first semester of the first year in the 4 coursework units, they give you $4,000. And then if you get 70% or higher in the second semester of the first year, so the last 4 coursework units, they give you another $4,000. If you get over 75% in the first year for all your units, then they give you a $16,000 scholarship for your second year to do the actual thesis itself. So for me, even though I had finished my honors degree, I know that unfortunately honors is not recognized internationally. So if I want to do a PhD overseas, which I might do because I want to do positive psychology, and that isn't offered as much in Australia as it is in UK, I need to get a degree which allows me to do a PhD overseas, right? And the Masters of Research wasn't my stepping stone for that. It's also worth noting that you don't need honors to do the Masters of Research. You only need to do your 3-year bachelor's, and I believe it's about a grade point average of, no, not grade point average, average admission mark of 60% or so to be, to apply and to get accepted in. I also know that if you have finished honors, it wasn't available to me when I did it, but if you have finished honors, now you can actually apply for advanced standing and skip the first year altogether, potentially. It is on a case-by-case basis, and that will allow you to go straight into the thesis component of the Masters of Research. I did it mainly because it opens up more doors for me, essentially, and allows me to get market research positions that I might not necessarily have gotten if just an honors degree. Does that answer the question?
Thank you very much. We have a question that's asking, are there growth areas emerging now and in the future for graduates of psychology? Anyone?
So one of the areas that we're expanding into in psychology at the moment that's very, very new is digital and cyber psychology. We have a new professor who'll be about to start in October who specialises in cyber psychology. The university also has a Bachelor of Cyber Security with a new degree with some psychology units. We have the DigiLab for research, which is headed by Professor Craig McGarty here at Western. So I think one of the areas that we're really moving into in terms of future employment areas in psychology is that digital world, the online world, and cyber psychology. So that's one that really stands out that's being targeted at Western, and I think we're one of the leaders in Australia in terms of being able to target that future employment opportunity at the moment. There are probably other health opportunities that the clinical people might want to talk about.
The first thing I thought about as well is in line with what Phoebe has said. E-health is definitely a growing field, both nationally and internationally. And so what that means is psychologists and clinical psychologists are providing a lot more of the intervention that we know via online platforms, it offers significant benefits for those who are living rurally and remotely in this country. So a lot of research, a lot of funding, and I suspect in the future a lot more job opportunities will be in that field. So,
thank you. Any other thoughts on that? There's a question here, just a general question. What further study can I do after 3 years of psychology? So that's not just in the field of psychology, but perhaps more broadly.
Sure, there's lots of options for further study here at Western after people finish 3 years. So as Wing was mentioning, there's the Master of Research, which can then lead to a PhD in psychology. You're also eligible to apply for the Master of Psychotherapy and Counselling, as well as the Master of Art Therapy after 3 years. You are eligible to apply for the Master of Social Work Qualifying, which is a very popular degree. We have the Graduate Diploma in Counselling. There's quite a number of opportunities for further study here at Western after 3 years. And of course, you have your bachelor's degree after 3 years. So you can also, a lot of students go straight out to the workforce. And with that bachelor's degree, obviously they're a lot more employable than they would be without the bachelor's degree. And psychology graduates are really sought after 3 years because mainly, or one of the huge reasons is the personal skills or interpersonal skills combined with those research skills, critical thinking skills. You've all been highly trained in data analysis, report writing, and those type of research skills are also jobs of the future. So that's really important to acknowledge.
Thank you. And as a graduate of psychology myself, a 3-year degree, I'm now working as a career education consultant. So there's an idea for you. There is a postgraduate course in that, but not offered at this university, unfortunately. Okay, there's a question here about registration. If you want to be a counsellor, is there another registration process for that?
Registration?
As a counsellor, yeah.
Registration as a counsellor, our graduate diploma, Master of Psychotherapy and Counselling. There are 2 registration bodies for counsellors and psychotherapists in Australia. They are the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia, PACFA, and also ACA, the Australian Counselling Association. All our degrees are accredited with them until 2026 or something like that. So yes, you can register. You come out as a provisional counsellor as well, but you can go straight into counselling once you're registered.
I guess the difference there would be that it's not a state registration, it's a professional registration, yeah?
Yep. So counselling made an effort to be self-regulated, not government regulated, and PACFA was formed as an umbrella association to do that. So yeah, it's professional registration.
There's some more questions around the 4th year psychology. There's a good question here. What is the role of the psychology clinic within the master's program?
So if you are enrolled in the master's program, in your 2nd semester of your 1st year, you move into clinic placement A. Now that will be your first experience seeing clients during that program. So unlike in some of the other programs, you will be supervised. Your first placement will be here on site at the university, and you will be supervised by university staff. We have a ratio of 1 supervisor, day supervisor to 5 students. And that means you'll be on placement with other students seeing clients, and you'll also have an allocated testing supervisor. Before you can move to your 2 external placements, so that's where the university sends you to placements in the local community, working and being supervised by other clinically registered psychologists. You must successfully complete your first internal clinic placement. You'll then move to an external placement, as well as completing a second clinic placement, each of 6 months in duration. We very much focus on a competency framework, so we are there to support you. You are very closely supervised by the academics, the supervisors in the clinic, who we have technology in the clinic, so audiovisual technology where we can watch your sessions live, or we can watch them back with you later, review your skills and support you to develop your skills in clinical psychology. So I guess that's the role.
There's a couple of students who are interested in perhaps moving into psychiatry, and whether there's a pathway between psychology and psychiatry.
So you need to do a medicine degree before you can do psychiatry. So there's no direct pathway from psychology. And I believe it takes about 13 years all up to study for psychiatry, because you do medicine first and then you do psychiatry. So psychiatrists are medical practitioners.
Yeah. If a student's interested in one of those other endorsed fields, like forensic psychology, for example, what would you recommend for them in terms of their pathway?
In the past, there used to be, well, there still is forensic masters at some universities. We used to have a forensic masters here, but I think from as far as just my guess about what's happened with a lot of those masters is that with the Medicare introduction of rebates for clinical psychology and professional psychology, it seemed that the clinical programs built up and the other programs became less. So the forensic masters, the education masters, there tended to be less of those programs around. So the forensic masters is still a program. A number of clinical psychologists will specialise in that forensic space as well as professional psychologists. So yeah, it's not just a pathway to do. I think you can take a number of pathways to specialise in the area of forensic psychology.
And that would be similar for some of those other endorsed areas as well?
Education, so if you want to be a school counsellor, there's a number of, I'm not 100% sure of the current situation with that because it seems to be changing, but I know there's one university who has a school counselling masters now, and they do that with the Department of Education. Currently, like I said, we used to have an education masters at Western, but we no longer have that pathway, but that doesn't mean that you can't go through a 5+1 pathway and then work as a school counsellor. I think the thing is that you've got to keep up to date with the requirements, because I think the requirements used to be that you had to be a teacher and a psychologist, and I think now in non-government schools, I actually have someone I supervised who works in a non-government school, so she's a registered psychologist and she also she now works as a school counsellor. So it depends on the school as to what they require. I don't know, does anyone else know anything more than what I've said about the school counselling pathway? So I think, I don't know that you have to be a teacher anymore.
Yeah. And just letting you know, we also
and
have
work for the Department of Education schools. Yeah,
we have a rep from the department on our next panels who might be able to talk to that.
Maybe they can answer that question too. Okay.
Great. There's a number of students interested in what's involved in the 4th year of our psychology program.
Yep, so the 4th year is 80 credit points. It's a 1 year full time. So you would you'd have a psychology research thesis. So this is your independent research project that you'd be supervised by one of the staff. So that's 30 credit points. You'd also be taking a research methods seminar where you'd be learning a lot of the research skills, how to design a study, how to collect data, how to analyze the data, and write it up in like a submission manuscript ready journal article. That's 20 credit points. Then you'd also take 3 10 credit points units. So counseling and consultation, theory and practice. Oh, thank you. And advanced topics, which changes every year. So it can be done full time in a year. We're one of the few programs who offer it part time. So you can split it over 2 years. I think we're the only ones in Sydney that do that. And we're also one of the largest intake of honor students, fourth year students. Currently, we are only taking honor students from Western Sydney University. So you can only apply for the honors if you've done your years 1 to 3 here. Otherwise, if you're external, you can apply, but you will not be enrolled in the honors. It'll be the graduate diploma. But you will be sitting and doing the exact same units as everyone else in honors. So it is an accredited fourth year, and if you want to go on to a master's, you can.
Perhaps that leads nicely into the final question for this session, which quite a few students are interested to know how they can get accepted into the program, and also how many students you take into the master's program.
Sorry, so fourth year or master's?
Both. Getting accepted into the honours program.
Okay.
And then,
Yep. Yeah. So if you're currently enrolled in 1865, so that's the B Psych, you will automatically be assessed when you come to the end of your third year. So you don't have to do anything. Then you'll be notified by admissions. Yep. Otherwise, if you're in any of the other programs, so the non-B Psych, for example, the Bachelor of Social Sciences, Psychology, you will have to apply. I think applications aren't open yet. They should be open soon, but you'll have to apply through UAC, and the deadline is October 31st. And so we take so if you're in the B Psych and you meet the minimum entry requirements, which is 70 plus in your level 2 and 3 units, as well as at least a credit average in your level 2 and 3 psych units, you will be guaranteed entry. Okay, so if you're in the B Psych and you meet it, you're set. However, if you're in any of the other programs, the non-B Psych, you will have to apply, and admission is competitive because it's based on supervisory capacity, although to date, every student who has met the minimum entry requirements has been let in. But our program is growing, so I'm not sure how much longer we can guarantee that everyone gets in. So this year we had about 115 honor students and graduate diploma students together.
And the master's clinical, how many students?
So the Master of Clinical Psychology, we have around 38 to 40 positions, and the Master of Professional Psychology, we have 40 positions. That's full-time positions. We do take part-time as well. Again, I think Western Sydney University is the largest, one of the largest clinical and professional psychology programs in Australia in terms of student enrolments, and we, I was going to say something else and it's disappeared. So yeah, it definitely there's pathways to our programs, and I want to say one more thing about the interview, because I think that that's a really important thing to be prepared for. A lot of people get to the end of honours and they're exhausted, and it's just like, I just need to tick this box of this interview. But the interview is really, really important. Once you've reached that academic standard, it's pretty much a level playing field in terms of competitiveness. So you really need to shine at that interview. And by shining, I mean we're looking for people turning up like it's a job interview. Okay, so don't turn up in your ripped jeans and your sort of your singlet top or whatever, because we're looking for professionalism there as well. So it's how you present. It's thinking about, like I said, the inherent requirements, thinking about how can I reflect on myself around these things so that I'm prepared in that way for this interview. We're not looking necessarily for how well you perform on an academic level, because you've already demonstrated that over and over and over again with your undergraduate and your honours results. Okay, so yeah.
I'd like to say thank you to the panel, and before we move, I would just like to say there's a lot more questions that came through. Thank you for all your questions. It's great to see such enthusiasm.